you listen to reason? Will you open your eyes? It's a wonder what you'll find with an open mind. You may be surprised. Yeah, gotta get away from this illusion for the sake of the world. This delusion has gotta
Hi again, and welcome to the Atheist Experience. I'm your host, Russell Glasser, and with me today is Martin Wagner.
Hello.
It's been a while since we've done a show together.
It's been quite a while since we've done a show, so.
Today is Sunday, September 1st, 2013. We are a live streaming call-in public access atheist television show based in Austin, Texas, dedicated to promoting positive atheism and the separation of church and state. We're available through live streaming on ustream.tv. The official Atheist Experience website is www.atheist-experience. You can provide feedback by commenting on the official show blog, freethoughtblogs.com/AXP, or you can email us at tv@atheist-community.org. If you like this show, please check out our related podcasts, including the newly resuscitated Non-Profits, now in its 10th season?
12th.
12. Whew.
Yeah.
And also Godless Bitches. You can find links at the Atheist Experience website. The next Non-Profits will be recorded live this Wednesday, September 4th. We are currently recording new shows every first and third Wednesday of the month. And I believe that's
Huzzah.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, Threadgills.
And, yeah.
We all go to Threadgills afterwards, so if you're in Austin, you can come hang out with us. It's on 301 West Riverside Drive, and we arrive around 6 p.m. after the show is over.
And now that we're into September, end of this month, Bat Cruise.
Bat Cruise. The Bat Cruise will be at the end of the month. Check out the ACA website.
29th, I believe.
Yep. I've reserved my spots. We got Emmanuel in Madison, Wisconsin.
Hi, how are you doing?
Just
I'm fine. How are you?
Just fine.
Doing well. Just want to start off by saying really enjoy what you guys do. I think the open and honest conversation is great. I am a Bible-believing Christian, so I'll start with that just to let everyone know. So my question, or the thing I wanted to discuss with you, is the term atheist, and really just getting a definition from you really quickly, just to make sure that we're talking about the same things when we're moving forward.
An atheist is a person who doesn't believe in any gods.
Okay, so do you believe that that stance is one of objectivity and logic, like that to name oneself atheist is a stance of objectivity, logic, sort of scientific, etc.?
I think it doesn't make sense to commit to belief in a thing unless there's a good reason to believe it.
I think that's an excellent statement as well.
Okay.
So the last time I called in, it was a couple months ago, I had introduced the concept of binary claims and how atheists reject basically the supernatural, anything that can't be observed, tested, etc. And they say, I can't believe in that because XYZ, I can't test it.
Sure, it doesn't mean a positive certainty that the thing can't exist. It's just that without a reasonable way to test your beliefs, there's no point in putting the belief in that.
Okay, I can agreed. That's a view that you guys hold. But then again, that being who's supernatural and natural being a binary existence, so anything that's not supernatural is natural, and vice versa. If you reject the supernatural, do you also reject, say, the claim that there's a natural cause to the universe?
Well, first off, when you say supernatural, you're talking about supernatural as if from the premise that, you know, such a thing exists. So we're not necessarily on board with you there. So I guess what I would need to know is, what, in your opinion, is the supernatural? How is it defined? What are its rules, et cetera, et cetera? What do you mean when you say supernatural?
Well, I would just go by any sort of Webster definition of supernatural, which would be anything that could not be included as natural in the natural world as we experience it, you know, today, as we would define natural today, which changes every day. But
well, I guess the problem is getting to that criteria, right? I mean, for example, would you know if you are encountering evidence of a thing that thing is not part of the natural world? I mean, it would seem in some ways that if you have encountered evidence for it, something that you are experiencing or observing in some way, then that is part of your experience, and we're natural beings, and so what sort of evidence, you know, can you look at to say there is a supernatural existence in addition to a natural one? What is it that persuades you that that's actually real?
I mean, we're speaking more conceptually than anything else, in the same way that I can't say, like, if you talk about love, it's like, well, what can you test and observe that would demonstrate? It's one of those, like, it's a concept.
You can test and observe
like
lots of things that demonstrate love.
Concepts.
Yeah, love is a thing that can be observed and can be demonstrated. Love is a human emotion, and people behave towards one another. If you feel a certain emotion towards someone, whether it's love, whether it's hate, good feelings or bad feelings, those emotions that you have, those feelings that you have for the person will be things that you express in your behavior towards them. So that's how we know that love exists. That's how we know that hate exists. So, but we're not talking about human emotions here. We're not talking about those kinds of abstracts. What believers in the supernatural are claiming is that there is a realm of reality that is apart from the natural realm of reality in which we live. You know, there are beings in this realm of reality. There are locations in this realm of reality. For example, if you believe in heaven and hell or other kinds of worlds. So this is very different from saying, well, you know, you can't necessarily, have this kind of observation about something like human feelings. Well, we know what human feelings are. They're a product of our natural world. They're a product of our minds and our brains and our emotions that we experience. So that's not really an accurate comparison. So what if you're talking about the existence of a realm of reality that is apart from the one we inhabit, then we want to know how you define that. How do you receive that experience? What evidence is there for it?
Well, so the evidence for that existence would be the same as, say, the evidence for a historical event that there was an eyewitness to. It would be that someone saw, X, Y, Z. Someone saw an angel. Someone saw God. Something that is clearly not something that you would encounter in the natural world on a regular basis. Something supernatural.
Let me ask you this: suppose somebody came up to you and they said they saw Allah. Like, the Muslim God. He was wearing a turban, and he went around with a scimitar, and he was like, I have no son. I'm probably really butchering what Allah is like. But suppose somebody told you that they saw something that was definitely a God who said that Islam is the correct religion. Would you believe them?
Well, I wouldn't.
Okay, why not?
Reason, because for the same reason I don't believe in the flying spaghetti monster.
Okay.
Is because the flying spaghetti monster, as an argument, is terrible because we know who made it. We know why they invented this flying spaghetti monster.
We don't know who created. We don't know everything about who created Islam any more than we know who created Christianity. What you're saying is you don't believe stuff just because somebody said they ran into them.
Yes.
Just because somebody said they saw something isn't a particularly good reason to believe an unusual claim, right?
It isn't. But then again, it's a reason to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No,
we were done. It's your turn.
Okay. It's a reason. It's one of those things where, in the pursuit of truth, right? The scientific method is one pursuit of truth. And there are sciences that pursue truth through the scientific method, through observing, testing, etc. History is not science, right? It's not. You can't prove that King Henry VIII.
Yeah, but you know there are standards for history, right? I mean, historians don't just like come across every single manuscript they see and say, "Oh, we have the Odyssey here. It says Zeus was stomping around on the battlefield." They don't just unconditionally accept stuff that people said, right? I mean, it may not be a hard science like physics in that you can't repeat everything that you see, but there are standards for weeding out unlikely claims even by historians.
Yes, but see, the problem, the thing that history, the limitation, I should say, is that the mere fact that one manuscript, recorded one event, and one event was recorded by multiple manuscripts, doesn't make that event more likely to be true.
Well, actually,
we have more evidence for that event occurring. That's simply it.
Oh, I would think that it would make it, the more that you have to corroborate a claim, then the more substance the claim has. Again, it may still not get you to the point of conclusive irrefutable proof. But for example, something that may be an event that is widely recorded through multiple sources and through disparate sources, it is the sort of thing that you can say, well, this is more likely to be an accurate account of something, or it's likely to get us closer to an accurate account of something than, for example, one person, scrubbling, something down on a papyrus parchment somewhere. So corroboration does help. That's one of the tools that Russell was talking about that historians use. For example, there's a well-known historian from antiquity called Herodotus, who wrote this extensive history about, the Mediterranean world, and he traveled to Egypt and all around and this, that, and the other, and recorded. But unfortunately, Herodotus had a really poor methodology, which was he was something of a sucker, and he would travel to Egypt and these foreign lands where, just like today, you would get these eager, smiling tour guides who would, for whatever coin you wanted to put in their hands, would just babble off whatever cockamamie story they came up with. And Herodotus eagerly jotted all this sort of stuff down as if these were amazing stories and histories that he was getting, and published all of this. But of course, many years later, the lack of corroboration between, for some of the accounts of things that Herodotus wrote about, coupled with a knowledge about the culture at the time, has led a lot of historians to think, okay, well, Herodotus, on the one hand, he's a very important figure, and he did offer us a lot of valuable insights at that period of time, but at the same time, he was not a terribly critical thinker in terms of what he would write about. He was a bit of a sucker at times, and he got quite a number of things that we now know to be wrong. So in terms of being able to corroborate claims, that is a very important thing.
Yes, it's very important from our ability to look back and say, from what we know from the evidence that we have, like, we can say more definitively that maybe possibly this happened. But from a truth-seeking perspective, from just the perspective of what actually occurred, it is not. Like, it does not, like, having more than one person write something down.
Why do you think it does?
Make it more likely.
Why not?
Why not?
Why not?
Same way. Well, I'll give you an example now. Like Facebook, like, a ton of people write things on Facebook, and they only write it on Facebook. They don't write it anywhere else. In 1,000 years, when people look back and they look at, what someone wrote, if they said that they had, papaya on Tuesday, like, it doesn't matter that they didn't write it in multiple places.
But
like,
I mean,
they literally had papaya.
But the principle at work here is that the kinds of things that you're talking about on Facebook are really mundane claims, right? I mean, if I tell you right now that I had a papaya a couple of days ago, and I didn't, but
that's okay.
But if I told you, like, I had spaghetti, spaghetti is a really common thing. I mean, there's spaghetti all over the place. There's lots of ways to verify that spaghetti actually exists, and it's a thing that people have for lunch all the time. So when I say I had spaghetti for lunch, there's not really much point in doubting me because that is such a tedious and ordinary claim that unless I'm a compulsive liar, then you have no reason to doubt me. On the other hand, suppose that I said...
It's not the sort of thing that there's any point in lying about.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, why would you lie about what you had to eat for lunch?
But then on the other hand, suppose that I said the other day for lunch, suppose that I said the other day I had grilled unicorn for lunch.
Right.
That's not a very typical claim. And that's the kind of thing where even if you think that I'm a generally honest person, you might ask me for a few details, and you might want to know, like, what restaurant did I go to, and what's the chef's name, and can you talk to him, right?
Exactly. I think that's exactly true.
Okay.
So, I mean,
Okay.
that's what we mean when we say, like, the more extraordinary a claim, the more backup it really needs. And a guy rising from the dead, you have to agree, is not a very typical result.
It's not a very typical result, but and I would say that claim, again, compared to the flying spaghetti monster, has history. It has a historical.
I don't think historians really.
Well,
culture.
yeah. Yeah, but again, that's it. When you're talking about an extraordinary claims versus non-extraordinary claims, I mean, okay, you might say, well, there is a history behind this. For example, there is a religious institution that has existed for a great many centuries,
and that is certainly true.
Yeah, and that's certainly true. But that doesn't really change the basic criterion of if you're still claiming something extraordinary, something that we know goes against what is commonly understood about how nature works, then it's not enough simply to say, well, but there is all this history about it, because then what you're sort of engaging in a very common logical fallacy at that point. It's like, well, this is something that has been believed for a long time, therefore it is more likely to be true. Well, that's not necessarily why something's likely to be true. I don't care if people have believed for 2,000 years or for 20 years or for 2 weeks about the resurrection of a dead body. I'm still going to require the same level of evidence before I accept that claim as true.
Well, I guess where you sort of erred a little bit there is that it actually does matter in terms of God. Like if God, like when you look at the paradigm, it has for internal validity. Like it matters how long and how many people actually believe this if God exists.
And I'll tell you why it doesn't.
No one believes in Zeus anymore.
And I'll tell you why it doesn't. Let me just point out, Emmanuel.
Let me finish.
Okay, go ahead and finish.
Okay, but we're gonna, Emmanuel, we are gonna have to wrap up this call pretty soon because.
But go ahead and make your point. Make your point. Go ahead and make your point.
Yeah, sure. So Zeus and what the Olympians believed. If what they believed actually was true, like looking back, let's say that we were going to be objective and evaluate what they said is true, at the possibility that it was true. The fact that no one believes it anymore, the fact that we've gone up to Mount Olympus and we know that they don't live there, and there was no paradigm for them to explain why someone would be able to go up to Mount Olympus and not see them there. Like there's not a lot of internal validity for that religion. However, for those that have stood the test of time, like they have more internal validity than those that didn't. Like just in a comparison way, in an objective evaluation way, and that's why that's something to evaluate.
Well, let me go ahead and give you a quick comparison. Again, using your climbing the mountain example, there have been, for example, numerous archaeological expeditions to find, for example, Noah's Ark. And these have either failed or they've claimed to find Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark has been found something like 17 or 18 times. And so in different spots. So again, in terms of internal validity, you're ignoring one thing, which is for in many cases, people who are genuine and devoted believers in a particular belief system might be doing their whole process a bit backwards. In other words, they will be looking for something to prove a pre-existing belief rather than let's just simply see what the evidence shows. But getting beyond getting beyond that, if you're just going to argue that because a belief has a great deal of longevity, it's more likely to be accurate and true, those Olympian gods that you talk about were worshipped for quite a bit longer than to date the Christian God has been worshipped. Christianity is a religion that's been going for about 2 millennia now. Artemis was a goddess who was worshipped for about 4,000 to 4,500 years. The Olympian gods were worshipped for about that period of time. The ancient Egyptian gods were worshipped for maybe around 5,000 to 6,000 years. So longevity is not really a good criteria for truth. Because there are a lot of religions and a lot of gods who are a lot longer running. They've had a great many more seasons than Christianity has.
See, but then it really, the past seasons matter less than the present, because again, if those gods existed, why would they not be worshipped now? Like it'd be now looking back. Like,
do you think that if you had lived, do you think that if you had lived in ancient Greece, it would have been a good idea then to believe in the Greek gods?
I believe there are reasons then not to believe in the Greek gods. Yes,
I believe there are reasons
in the
now.
same way that we have more evidence now.
And I believe now there are good reasons not to believe in the Christian God, and that is regardless of how many people and for how long they have believed a thing.
And what you're essentially saying, Emmanuel, is that the point you're making is basically that at a certain point in history, while it might have been a reasonable thing to believe in those gods, our actual knowledge of the real world through science, mainly through the scientific method, has since made those belief systems obsolete. So you don't see as many believers in the Olympian gods or the Egyptian gods anymore in this day and age. Why? Because, for example, our scientific understanding of the world and the universe means that we know that the sun is not, a god in a chariot riding across the sky. We know it's a star. We know it's a big ball of gas, etc., etc. So what you are essentially telling us is that religions eventually become obsolete the more our actual scientific real-world knowledge gives us a more complete picture of our reality. The supernatural ultimately always gives way to the natural. And our point is that we think that just because Christianity happens to be the religion of our culture, our opinion is that our science and what we understand about the world through science doesn't make the Christian God any more valid than those gods, and we think that ultimately the Christian God is going to be more and more and more weakened, belief in that God, the more we understand about our reality. And we are already seeing a lot of that. We're seeing a whole lot less Christian belief, for example, in the European democracies, and the more technologically advanced, educated parts of the world, Christianity is a very minor part of the culture. America's rather unusual in that we still have a very strong Christian culture, I think mainly because it's a very well-funded and very politically active Christian culture. But if you look in a lot of the countries where things are getting done, Scandinavian countries, Europe, what have you, very, very few people take Christianity as seriously as Americans do.
I would agree. I would say that the scientific method, by a lot of people's standards, because a lot of people get a very cursory knowledge of what the scientific method is, they take it with more, how should I say, steel than it should be taken, than even scientists who did the experiments would take it. And I feel like that is more the reason for the progression away from God, is because people have a belief that because scientists saw this, like, this must be true, whereas scientists are like, this is what we've observed, and I'm a scientist myself, like, this is what we can say based on what we've observed. These are conclusions that we make from that.
Yeah. What kind of scientist are you?
Well, I got my bachelor's in biochemistry. I finished my PharmD, so I am a pharmacist, and I'm currently getting my master's in pharmacy administration.
I'm not sure that qualifies you yet as a professional scientist. But
you have an interest in science.
But you're right. They do that.
I have a PharmD.
And I mean, science.
I read scientific studies for a living.
Right.
Fair. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think we're going to have to move on. I was trying to say not that people don't like you, but that people don't like it when one call runs the entire show. But it's been a good conversation, and you're welcome to call back another week.
Excellent. Thank you for having me.
Take care, Emmanuel. Thanks for calling.
Bye.
Yep.
Greg in France.
Yeah, that's me.
Thanks for holding so long.
That's okay. Thank you for having me.
Certainly.
So, my situation is obviously quite different. Being an atheist in France is, I think, really different from being one in Texas.
Yeah, we know.
We were just talking about that. We were just to Emmanuel, weren't we? Yeah.
Secularism here is more to the tune of freedom from religion. Here it's more an anti-believer version of don't ask, don't tell, really. Mm-hmm. I wanted to call to say that still, while the country itself is quite secular, religion itself has left quite a huge mark on the country.
Yeah, I've been to Notre Dame. It's got some pretty cool architecture.
Mm-hmm. Religion has given us some really great buildings, I'll say that.
Yeah, no, I mean, because they were the guys with the money.
Notre Dame, that's paid by the state. Mm-hmm. Not for religious reasons, but more for its historical factor.
Yeah, sure. I mean, at the time, it was created as...
problem.
Yeah, go ahead.
There was a problem in 2006 concerning Notre Dame itself, or the square around it, because before it was called the Square de Notre Dame. But then the mayor decided to change it to Square John Paul II.
Ooh. And
So
I'm guessing that upset
quite-
some people.
It came out of left field, really, and it was really strange in that the guy, the mayor at the time, was a socialist, a gay socialist. So to that come from him was quite a surprise for everyone, I think.
Yeah, was it some kind of bizarre political pandering, or what do you think was behind that? Did he explain himself?
I'm not sure about political pandering, because the guy was a socialist. He was quite liked, and I don't think there wasn't at the time a Catholic lobby like you could see now with the gay marriage that you see on the news. That was also quite a surprise. But no, it was. I think it just died at the time. The Pope just died. And, I don't know. Maybe he felt it was because he was quite liked in France, but whatever. Yeah,
but this mayor probably just thought that would be a nice gesture that people
marketing
would.
strike.
And miscalculated.
Yeah. But yeah, we still have, for example, I was talking about when we have the weather forecast on the television. We still have the Catholic saints associated with each day of the year.
Okay. Well.
So it will be September the 3rd. It will be Saint Greg. So.
Wait. So they say the saint's name on the weather report?
Yeah, on the weather report. Yes.
Really? That's a weird detail that I wouldn't ever expect anyone to.
I did not know that.
Yeah, tomorrow the sun will get up at 6 a.m. and it will be Saint whatever the day.
And there's a saint for every day of the year.
Every single one.
Wow.
So 300. Wow, that's a real saint
300
business.
All different.
Huh.
I feel like that's unfair to new saints because they must not be able to get their own day anymore. Like they were trying to saint Mother Teresa a while back.
Well, maybe they have
Day.
a thing where if they need to make room for more daily saints, they'll take some of the more long-standing daily. They'll upgrade them to weekly saints and free up a day for. I don't know, but how strange.
For example, to also public schools, we still have a few religious holidays.
Well, so do we.
Well, we have Christmas, obviously, but in France, it's quite a bit easier to dissociate Christmas from its Christian origin, because in English it's Christmas, so the Christ is quite obvious in the name.
Yeah, in France it's Noël, right?
In French it's Noël for the New Year. So people don't even know sometimes. Yeah, it's from the Christians.
No.
So you have Christmas, you have All Saints Day, you have holidays for that. But for example, also you can see the rise of cultural Catholicism. There was a poll in 2007 where 51% of the French people said they were Catholic. But yet, of those who said they were Catholic, only half said they believed in God.
Huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got one question. What is your personal take on the influence of Islam in France? Because I know that's been a little controversial over there.
Well, it depends, really. They have no. If you talk specifically in politics, they have absolutely no voice. You do not have famous clerics who speak in their name. I think there are tens of thousands of mayors in France, and not a single one is Muslim.
Interesting. So
what what's
So I guess
happening
you wouldn't like give any credit to the idea that like Islam is about to take over the country or anything like that.
I doubt it. Well, you know, hardcore Christians in the U.S. will say, yeah, you will be overrun. They have like 10 kids when you have one.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've heard those guys.
And
Yeah.
the thing is, they may have more kids. The first generations may have more kids. But in the end, the same thing happens to them that happens to the rest of us. They don't follow the religions of their parents.
That's
they
a
just sort of
beautiful thing.
drift
I gotta
away.
say.
That's
They drift
progress.
away,
We like.
actually. So of course, now we have the difficulties with third generations. Because the first generation, the second, were right in France after the war in Algeria. They didn't practice their religion. They were quite open to the new culture. But to be frank, the French government kind of ignored those persons. They didn't pay their salary for their participation in the war. And so their grandkids have grown kind of a resentment to the country.
I see.
And those are the ones who run to Islamism.
Gotcha.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's why you see what we call the city blocks, the horrible-looking city blocks you can see where there was all those fires in 2003.
Right. Yeah.
All those
From
cars
riots.
burning. It was those guys.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a little bit more complicated because you see they say, yeah, the Christians have all those churches that are already built in the country, and we have nothing. So could you please help us pay for our mosques?
Right.
Yeah.
It can be quite difficult because while we say we are a secular country, it's hard to say we are a secular country. We do not participate in religious matters when we have the saints' days,
Sure.
religious holidays.
Yeah, I get that.
Notre Dame de Paris is in the square. It's called John Paul II.
Okay.
And we
Greg.
have,
Greg.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna wrap up and
Okay.
pick up another caller. But thanks for the insights about your country.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I learned a lot of interesting things right there. I
Absolutely.
do appreciate that. But yeah, we do kind of have to move on.
All right.
Thank you for calling,
Nice
though.
talking to you. See you.
Thanks. Bye.
Justin in Indiana.
Hi, how's it going, guys?
Just fine.
Pretty good.
Awesome. I am very, very excited to call the show. I am an atheist as well. And I just wanted to say briefly that watching you guys, I discovered you on YouTube when I had my wisdom teeth taken out, and it really helped me get through it, so thank you.
I'm glad you
That's-
didn't develop some kind of aversion to it.
Yeah, that's the best praise I think we could have possibly gotten. Yes, you helped me recover from my wisdom teeth surgery.
Right.
It's a miracle, right? We have the healing touch.
Right? So thank you guys a whole lot. My main question for you guys is, Steven Pinker recently wrote an article in the New Republic magazine about science is not the enemy. And he talks about
Okay.
how people have been constantly attacking the philosophy of positivism. And I just wanted to know, because positivism is essentially the philosophy that anything that we can sort of discern from the natural world, we can discern through the social world as well. And I wanted to know what you guys thought. Do you think that positivism is a natural sort of corollary of atheism, or do you think that the anti-positivist movement, which is really pervasive in a lot of political circles with like Jackson Lears, who writes for Nature magazine, who critiqued Sam Harris's work, do you guys think that positivism is a logical corollary of atheism, or do you think that anti-positivism could also be part of atheism? And if so, how would you be able to discern that? Hopefully, I hope I wasn't confusing you guys.
I don't know about Martin, but I think this question is above my pay grade. I'd have to sit down and read stuff. about it.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't read Pinker's article, so maybe I should. Maybe you could email us the link to that at the TV show address.
Absolutely.
Sure.
I don't know if this is specifically what you're talking about, but there has been a great deal of debate within movement atheism recently about what should movement atheism take an interest in. Okay. And there is a contingent of us who believe, for example, that such things as social justice is something that is necessary for atheists to get behind.
Right. So basically, addressing issues of social,
for example, inequality,
racism,
homophobia,
sexism,
bigotry, misogyny, things like that. Our take on it is that if we are going to be skeptics about institutions and attitudes that institutions have handed us down from time immemorial, and if we're going to look at these things and say these aren't good ideas, then we should do that across the board. And particularly as atheists, if we are going to, for example, reject organized religion, and if we are going to reject some of the mores that have been imposed on society by that religion, for example, all these anti-gay attitudes, anti-marriage equality, that sort of thing. We have people like Brian Fisher and Fred Phelps and all of the really, really outspoken homophobic, militant anti-gay people out there. They're all coming from a fundamentalist religious perspective, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if we are going to reject the religion, then we also have to look skeptically at the moral ideas and precepts that those guys are trying to hand us based on their religion, and saying, yeah, no, it's wrong to repress certain groups of people that you don't like. It's wrong to deny certain groups of people's basic civil rights. And so as atheists, we should maybe be for those things.
Right. And also, if atheism is going to be successful as a movement, effectively, that brings in as many people as possible who are learning to reject religion, then it makes sense to look at kind of principles that would be welcoming to as many groups of people as possible.
Yeah, and those things can bring all those folks into our wheelhouse. And sure, just being an atheist doesn't, I think, necessarily lead to any other kinds of social or philosophical or political attitudes. You can not believe in any invisible magic men in the sky, and be the most conservative fellow out there. You can, so the one thing doesn't, I think, necessarily lead to another. But I think that there is a good case to make for there being a natural progression from rejecting religion and being atheist to saying that. But now, if what we are promoting is a secular world, then we need to have a really nice secular world for all of us to live in,
or at least an idea of what a nice secular world would look like.
And then we should pursue that. So
let me just interject and say that I agree with you guys completely. And I think the thing that I guess my point is that primarily, like, the anti-positivists would argue exactly against what you were saying. Essentially, that they would argue that there's no good discernible way that we can gain evidence of the social world. Everything is subjective, everything is relative, and so there's no bothering in dealing with issues in a way that's sort of scientific.
I think I talked to philosopher Dan Finke a couple of months ago, and I think what he would say about this, and I tend to be on his side for the most part, is that the health of the health of a society isn't an exact science, but then neither is the health of your body. And so if a doctor tells you, you really should lay down the Twinkies and get some exercise, you could say to him, well, there's no absolute guarantee that me not stuffing my face with Twinkies will be good for my health. And I know this guy who lived to be 103. And he loved Twinkies. But there is such a thing as measuring the health of a person and people being more or less healthy, and certain behaviors correlating with a person who's in better shape. And I think in the same sense, when we deal with secular ethics, we're trying to figure out the kinds of ways that a society can behave that are most just and work the best to promote the health of its citizens. And so I think that if that's what anti-positivists, if anti-positivists think that it doesn't matter what you do, as far as as far as whether there's a right and a wrong thing to do. I'm with the positivists in this case.
And I guess that's why part of our slogan is that we promote positive atheism. I think that's what we really mean about it.
And that was essentially my point. I mean, I think the thing that's important to, I guess I wanted to call about was this idea that anti-positivists tend to always think that people who promote science and reason and critical thinking, that they're always the ones that are dogmatic. And that is always the thing they always hit on. And I'm like, if anybody's dogmatic, it's the irrationalist, it's the non-logical, it's the religionist, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I mean, I hesitate to lump people with religion just as a blanket way of insulting them.
Well, I don't think that's what he meant. I think that's just, people are resistant to moving out of their comfort zone. Religion is one thing that gives people a comfort zone, and one of the ways in which they get defensive when you try to persuade them of other ideas is by, you're a militant new atheist.
Yeah, heard that.
No, I'm just trying to tell you what, I mean, and people, and of course that's a thing they project, right? The angry ones are the ones who are always telling you how angry you are.
If people ask me, why do you support separation of church and state? I have an answer. I have specific examples of ways that that the state interfering with church and vice versa lead to social results that we don't like. And I have specific anecdotes about when that happened and what the bad result was, and kind of statistical evidence of different amounts of involvement in different countries and throughout history. I think that there are things that we can learn from other countries and other time periods that really do inform our beliefs and don't just make what we should do ethically kind of a random crapshoot like these guys seem to be saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a good point, because I think the bigger problem is that you have a lot of people who, the moment a new scientific explanation is understood, or somebody writes an article defending science, there always tends to be someone who comes out of the woodwork, if you will, who can either be religious or not, and just says, oh, you're being dogmatic, oh, you're being this. And it just seems absurd to say that someone's being dogmatic when they're being as critical as they can.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, you see that? That's a very common thing right now. It's a very worrying thing in our culture today, where you have the anti-vaccination crowd. You've got
global warming deniers.
That crowd too. Yeah. There's always some sort of denialist who comes along because they see new information as a threat to a status quo that gives them comfort. And or at least they think gives them comfort, or they just and that's kind of, it's conservatism. I mean, if conservatism is, let's keep things the way they are, let's not change, let's not have these great societal sea changes that upend the thing that gives me the nice privileged position I live in. So there's always going to be that kind of resistance. So we're seeing a lot more of it though lately, and it is kind of worrying.
Yeah, right. I wonder, why do you guys think that it's sometimes in academic circles, or that sometimes in like the mainstream press, like the New Republic published Lear's reply to Pinker, and Lear basically just said that Pinker was cherry picking about his position on positivism, because he basically argued that positivism led to eugenics and sort of.
Well, I mean, until I read his article, I won't be able to address a specific thing he said.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay. I think we're gonna wrap up.
Yeah, we got 15 minutes and a bunch more people in line, but I appreciate your questions. Were really cool. Appreciate it.
Thanks
awesome.
for
Thank
calling.
you very much. You guys have a good night.
Thank you, and don't forget to email us that link.
And I predict that before a couple of days have passed, we will hear from both anti-vaxxers and global warming
do you
deniers.
think?
Just a few.
Do you think we upset that apple cart?
Okay, so I believe we have Angel from here in Austin.
Hello?
Hello, you're on.
Hi.
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 Hi. I've got a couple, maybe a few real simple questions. Most of them kind of yes and no, but they're kind of having to do with the deep things of life and death and our existence.
Okay.
Who am I talking to?
This is Russell and Martin over there.
Yeah.
Russell and Martin.
Yes.
Hello.
All right. So, either of you guys could answer the question, but I guess my first question is, do you have a soul?
I would say no.
Yes.
I mean, dependent on what you mean by soul.
Right. Well, by soul,
Ray Comfort once tried to tell us that soul just means life. So yeah, I've got a life.
Yeah, see, soul. Words like soul, they're similar to words like spiritual, and that everyone who takes those terms seriously will give you a different definition of it. So
exactly.
If what you're talking about, Angel, is there an aspect of my being that will leave my body and survive after my physical death, then no, I don't believe I have that kind of a soul.
Oh, okay. Do you know? Okay, so you don't believe you have that kind of soul. Do you know for a fact that you don't have that kind of soul?
I don't know for a fact that there aren't 3,000 different versions of me living in 3,000 alternate universes.
Right.
Right. But I have no reason to believe that there are. So until I get some reason, some sensible reason to believe that that kind of a soul exists within me somehow, I'm refraining from believing in that. I don't see any good reason to believe that I do. I don't have positive proof, but but again, this whole absolute knowledge thing really is kind of a red herring. You don't have to have absolute knowledge of something to choose to believe it or not believe it. You just have to have what you think are good reasons not to choose or believe it.
Well said.
Right.
Thank you.
Excellent answer. Okay, so you deny as of right now that you have a soul. So you're basically saying that right now you exist, but one day you will no longer exist ever again?
That is correct.
Okay. My second question is, do you have a conscience?
What do you mean?
Something that tells you in your heart and or in your head the difference between right and wrong.
Do I have reasoning processes that inform my decisions? Yes.
Well, not so much. Well, the decisions that I'm talking about are more like morally right or morally wrong. For example, like if I was to push an old lady in front of a bus.
Right.
And
Were you listening to the last call?
I kind of caught in the wits ends of it. I didn't know you guys were starting at 4:30.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
But, I mean.
But that is the same thing, right? I mean, we have ways in which we use our reason to evaluate, positive acts versus harmful acts, and we act accordingly. And so, we have the reasoning capacity to understand the difference between those things.
Okay, but you're calling them thinking processes. You don't think there's anything above and beyond that, like a moral conscience, maybe like a God-given conscience?
Again, just like a soul, we don't think that there's something like in a non-physical realm that's making those decisions for us.
And why would there need to be? I mean, we are perfectly capable of assessing the consequences of an action, not only to ourselves but to those around us, and deciding whether or not that is a wise choice to make. So we are decision-making beings. That's part of who we are and what we do.
So I guess if I was to rephrase the question, do you have a conscience? And I said that your answer is yes, based on your answer. You have thinking capabilities to determine the difference between right and wrong. Then you would say yes to that type of conscience, right?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And those thinking abilities are, of course, shaped by the way we're brought up and the things that we observe during our lives.
But there's also, we do have, as a species, this is a known thing, it's natural for humans to have an innate sense of empathy. There have been tests run using groups of children and very, very small, like 2-3 years old, where they evaluate their behaviors, and they found that there is a natural empathic sense that people people have for one another. And I think that has to do with the kind of creature we are. We're human beings, and so the kind of species that we are is a social species, which means that we survive by grouping together and working together to ensure our species' success.
Some other primates have demonstrated some of the same things
We've seen exactly this sort of thing in a lot of in chimpanzee societies and in gorilla societies. They actually have a sense of justice and right and wrong. Little groups of families of apes will punish those who misbehave within their little family. This is different.
Under 10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay,
I think
all right.
Angel should get to his next
It's been so long since I've been on the show. I'm in like prattle mode today, guys. I'm sorry. I'm just enjoying it. Yeah. But anyway, so on with your point.
Okay, so you called it an innate sense of sympathy or empathy?
Empathy.
Okay, so why does that exist?
Because we have evolved as a social species. It is necessary for our species, Homo sapiens, to survive. We are the kind of animal that works together to ensure that survival. This is different, for example, from sharks. Sharks are not a social species. They're sort of on their own, doing their own thing. They only get together to mate and make other sharks. So we are that kind of animal.
But why do we have a need or a drive to survive? Where did that come from?
Well,
that is the basic principle of evolution. I mean, basically anything that didn't have a basic drive to survive would be dead now and would be replaced by something else that did have that drive. So that's not a question of really whether it's better or worse objectively to have a survival instinct. It's just that in point of fact, anything that doesn't have a survival instinct doesn't survive. It's almost a tautology.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Moving on, because that could be a long discussion. Do you believe in temptation?
What? Like with all your questions, what does that mean?
Yeah, I mean...
something that urges us to do something we probably know we shouldn't do, but...
sure, yeah. I mean, people go through that in life, yeah.
So, why would you explain that they exist?
Why would temptation exist?
Right.
Why wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, this gets down to, I think this ties into our ability to discern right from wrong and make wise decisions about it. Sometimes, we're imperfect beings and we don't always make the best decision. And we may do something that is not the best choice, but we'll do it because we decide, well, maybe it'll be a little bit fun. Maybe we just want to rebel. Who knows? Maybe we're just not feeling happy in our lives and we think that doing a particular thing, which in most other situations you'd be able to look at that and say, yeah, it's pretty dumb. But the long and short of it is, just because we are the kind of creature we are doesn't mean that we're always smart in what we do. And so, and so if you make a dumb decision based upon bad reasoning, and you could call that temptation, right? Like the temptation for, some clerk working a lousy job at, McDonald's and he's not making good money, so he's tempted, to slip a 20 out of the till and put it in his pocket. That's a dumb decision, bad decision, but he may, in a moment of, just being emotional and not all that sensible, do it, and guess what? And he'll suffer the consequences for that if he's caught.
And also that I wouldn't universally say that was bad. I mean, there are like Robin Hood stories, for instance.
Well,
I mean, I'm just saying, if you want to make one general principle like thou shalt not steal, it doesn't take into account like whether you live in an oppressive society and maybe stealing is the only way to survive some of the time.
I mean, you can always think of examples of where like a generally immoral action would be a specifically, would be the thing to do then.
I mean, if our minds were perfectly developed, then we'd always make perfect decisions and not use, like, for instance, the desire for some short-term pleasure to influence our rational thinking about long-term goals. But we're not that perfect.
Well, when you say we're imperfect beings and we're not that perfect, what standard of perfection are you talking about?
Well, just a very basic.
That makes sense.
I mean, all he means is that if we were sensible enough, if we were completely sensible all the time, so that we never made just through foolishness
like
a
if
bad
we always
decision.
did things perfectly in our own self-interest and with our long-term survival and happiness in mind.
Right.
Yeah. It's as close as you can get. But then that's the whole learning. That ties back into the question of having a conscience and having an ability, a rational ability to discern right from wrong. There's a little thing that we refer to as maturity versus immaturity. Sometimes, an immature person, like some juvenile delinquent or someone, is going to be someone who is going to make irrational decisions.
Your average 13-year-old on Call of Duty.
Yes, Dad, Russell. Yeah. Yes,
Gotcha.
It's okay. So we're learning beings and we screw up quite a bit, and even people say,
That's fair enough. Like I said, I don't want conversations to last forever.
It's cool.
Do you believe, does atheism hold, or do at least you guys believe that humans evolved from a single-celled organism?
Well,
I wouldn't.
That's simplified way.
Yes. First of all.
Yeah.
And then Martin will now go on to explain.
I'm going to say that the idea that all living things today can be traced back to common ancestors. Yeah. I mean, I think that's pretty well established in the literature.
I wouldn't refer to that as an atheist belief, though. That is the conclusion that science has come to, and atheists just tend to be more likely than theists to not reject science for religious reasons.
Although some of the best evolutionary scientists out there are themselves theists, like Ken Miller and Francisco Lea and people like that. So
yeah. Well, how my contention is, how would an organism know that light and sound exist without having eyes and ears? And then how would it, know how to develop eyes and ears to,
I think that we've got 2 minutes left.
And this is one where we would have to like point you to websites and say, go read all these long articles and papers.
Because
we can't answer that.
There's some very basic mistakes you're making in just the way that you formulated your question. So if I were to tell you to do one thing, I would type in Evolution 101 and go to a site that Berkeley has that comes up.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah.
One real quick last question. I appreciate you guys' time. Do you believe that we feel emotions in our hearts?
No, we pump blood in our hearts.
Yeah, we feel emotions in our minds, in our thoughts. So up here.
We feel our emotions in our stomachs sometimes. It depends on what kind of emotion.
Yeah, you're thinking of getting to thread gills now, aren't you? Yeah. But it's all up here. This is where we all are.
Okay. I appreciate you guys' time.
Oh, thanks for the good questions, Angel. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
And we have had a bunch of really patient folks that we haven't gotten to take, and we apologize to Lewis and John and the other John and stuff.
We will talk to them for a couple of minutes after the show is over. Although, do we have like 1 minute or two left?
It's 26:50.
We don't have time to take another caller.
Yeah.
But gosh, I'm looking forward to the Bat Cruise.
Why, yes.
Like I am every year.
Indeed.
Wait, are we allowed to say yet who's coming to? Surely we are, right? What? Yes? Okay, PZ Myers is going to be lecturing before the Bat Cruise and joining us on the Bat Cruise. So we'll be hanging out with him. And, it has been a very low-key, friendly show. I mean, I think we got to a lot of we agreed with some people and disagreed with other people.
Aren't we supposed to be horrible, mean people who insult everyone who calls, and we're just complete assholes all the time? Isn't that our modus operandi? I think we failed our own show today.
Yeah.
We just
people are complaining in the chat room.
We haven't
more.
Yes, I know. Some Sundays you get screaming matches.
Crush your enemies. See them driven before you.
Feel the limitations of their women and blah blah blah.
But I always have fun with you, Martin. Thanks for coming.
Why? So do I, Russell. And sometimes it's on the show.
Yes. Well, we won't talk about that. Okay. Bye, everyone. See you next week.
Enjoyed it. So long.